Welcome. This is City Council Workshop Budget Meeting. And we've got two items on the agenda. One is the Sunnyside Housing Authority, one's the budget. For the record, all members of council are present except for Councillor Hicks, and Councillor Hicks has asked for an excused absence. If there's no objection, we can do that. I hear no objection. Councillor Hicks is excused. And it looks like our staff is fairly well represented as well. Thank you everyone for being here. To our audience, keep in mind at a workshop meeting, we don't really make provision for public comments, but you're certainly welcome to take notes and ask us all sorts of questions afterwards. So we'll be happy for that. Council, I had a thought. We have two items on the agenda. The first one is the budget workshop, and the second is housing authority discussion. We have a member of the housing authority board here and wondering if you'd mind switching the order on the agenda so we could let Keitha do her part first. And if she chooses to stay for the budget discussion, she's certainly welcome to do so. If she would rather not, then we can excuse her. Is there any objection to that? All right, we will start then with the Sunnyside Housing Authority discussion, and Madam City Manager.
And I will pass it over to Keitha Kimbrough, who is the Executive Director for the Sunnyside Housing Authority and has been since what?
It's been a couple of years.
Yeah, I figured. And just full disclosure, I worked for Keitha for 7 years, 5 years at the group home and then 2 years in the office. So I understand the housing authority quite well. And she was a great boss. So anyway,
Keitha,
you have the floor.
Thank you.
Can you pull the microphone a little closer to you? It's a flex.
It needs to be on. Too.
Yeah, there's a button in the center to turn it on.
Push.
There you are.
Read. Oh, okay. Thank you.
Mayor, can we have the clerk turn on the council vibe camera?
Your camera's not on, clerk. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. We didn't realize it wasn't on.
No worries, sir. Thank you.
What we're finding in housing, and I'm sure it's in city management and other venues as well, but times have changed. We're a small housing authority, and in spite of ourselves, we've kind of remained a small housing authority. So what we find now is that there would be real benefits to being larger in order to have the sort of administration that we think we would do better by our community with. We would need many more units than we have. So what we've actually done is talked with Yakima Housing Authority about possibilities of forming a joint housing authority. And the benefits to that would be efficiencies in scale. We'd reduce the duplication of some positions, but we'd also, we feel, bring more opportunities and more specializing talents to the job at hand. So for instance, if a notice of funding availability were to come out, instead of maybe being, encumbered by the auditor who's there to do the previous, you'd actually have somebody on staff who could respond to the NOFA. So the other thing we find is that we're a great training ground for people. People come, and I hope they enjoy working with us. Oftentimes they leave and they go to bigger housing authorities. So again, we start over. So in looking at how we're operating, in looking at what we could do if we were a bigger housing authority, we've been meeting with Yakima Housing Authority for several months now to try to figure out the benefits of joining. And I actually have a handout that I can leave with people where we go into a little more detail about what those benefits are. What we find is that if our communities are supportive of this, that there is a proposed path forward, and it would require the city to grant Yakima Housing Authority the authority to operate in Sunnyside through an interjurisdictional resolution. And for the city of Yakima, we're asking that they agree to consider recommendations for housing authority commissioners from the city of Sunnyside, because we want to retain our voice in matters. We would actually look at transferring assets to Yakima Housing Authority. Yakima Housing Authority would rebrand to reflect a broader geographic service area. And we would make efforts to actually form a joint housing authority ultimately, so that we still are figuring as prominently as we feel we should once we were able to do a joint housing authority. We looked at the areas covered. Yakima currently operates 500 units of affordable housing in the valley and in the county. The Sunnyside Housing Authority operates approximately, well, just over 300 units. So when you combine those, that's a fair amount of units covered. There are similar programs that each one of us spend time administering. And then we also looked at the number of cities that we already have a presence in. Yakima has their housing in, of course, the city of Yakima, Toppenish, Granger, Cowiche, Tieton. They also have interlocal agreements in place with Wapato, Toppenish, Zilla, and Grandview. Sunnyside has interlocal agreements in place with Grandview and Mapton. So we're already figured in many communities in Yakima County. So we just wanted to bring this forward and hopefully get the support from the city to move forward to what we think would be really better operations in the long term that are more responsive to the needs of the community, and position ourselves in a better place to take advantage of funds that are there to accommodate the population we serve. I know that was in a nutshell.
All right, well, thank you very much. And council, before I turn it over for questions, in the interest of full disclosure as well, I have made a fair amount of income over the years working for the housing authority. I have a carpet and floor cleaning business, and they have floors in their units, and I quite often work on those. So just disclosure there. So council, any questions or comments?
What kind of lead time are you looking to make this move if it does happen?
At present, it doesn't look like a very fast change. RCW 3582, we refer to as the Housing Authorities Law. It has a fairly prescriptive process for how you go about forming a joint housing authority or consolidating other housing authorities. And it's a very expensive process as it is currently written. And it's a lot more involved than it might be. There actually may be an effort before the legislature next year to provide a quicker fix for, we're not the only housing authorities that are considering possibly joining with another housing authority. So it would provide maybe now a more logical, if you will, response to actually doing that. The way the RCW is set up now, Yakima Housing Authority and Sunnyside would have to transfer all of their assets to a newly formed housing authority and then vacate. Their cities would have to vacate the housing authorities that had been. And that's really an expensive process to do when you're talking about a lot of properties. So what we're thinking of doing in this case, being the smaller housing authority, we'd probably try to transfer our assets to Yakima instead of our both having that expense, they would then rebrand to reflect that they're a housing authority composed of Yakima and Sunnyside properties. And then, as I say, if the quick fix were to be achieved, they would also go through that process so that we could arrive at the place we had hoped to be, which was a joint housing authority, Yakima and Sunnyside.
Further questions?
And are they looking forward to doing it with the other cities in the valley?
Well, first, we're going to our respective cities. So, Yakima's talking with Yakima, we're talking, of course,
Thank
with
you.
Sunnyside. But that would follow if, we have the support of our city.
So council, the housing authorities can't do this without the permission of the city council. We do have that much authority over them. I think over the years, we haven't really interfered much with the activities of the housing authority, have we?
Well, no, and in fact, that
Not allowed to by statute, Mr. Mayor.
No, that's correct.
Of course, the city declared the need for it back in 1943, when we were first organized, and we since then, the city has been supportive. The city has nominated, or I know that's the wrong word, actually
Appointed.
elected our commissioners.
Pointed, yes.
Appointed, thank you. Actually, the things that we would really need from the city to do this would be your willingness to grant Yakima the authority to operate within the city of Sunnyside. The way the RCWs are set up is so that there aren't overlapping jurisdictions. So that's really a critical piece. And of course, we would want you to be supportive if at all possible. The city and Sunnyside have a very long history, and it's been entertaining at times to look back through old documents and letters and see the exchanges. And I won't see more, but it's just, there's been a lot of work and effort on both the part of the city and the housing authority to think outside the box, to basically bring affordable housing options to the community. And we just want to see that continue.
Further questions or comments?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
no questions, just a comment. One, I would support the housing authority's wishes here. Keisha's been an outstanding executive director for the organization. The time that I was mayor of the city, I had an opportunity to work with her on a couple of investigations and things of that nature, and I was very happy with the outcome of that. My only concern would be that the RCW 3852 is very specific in that it authorizes the mayor to appoint the commissioners. So we would be allowing the mayor of Yakima to make these appointments. And that's nothing on you, Keisha, or anything of that nature, but politically, we need to be mindful of that because the mayor of Yakima may not put the people on the commission that we want. And I would be concerned about Sunnyside not having any representation or very little. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And you do bring up a valid point, sir. Wonder if there's a way that we could put that in the organizational plan that people from Sunnyside would be required to be on that board in order to ensure that that does happen. And I was just going to say, in my meeting with the Board of Commissioners for the Housing Authority, I was impressed with their dedication. These folks have all served for a great number of years and still speak with enthusiasm and conviction, and they have the best interest for this housing authority in their minds at all times. And they're trying to come up with the best alternatives that they possibly can. I know it was very evident to me that they had struggled with this for some time. This wasn't just an idea that came out of the blue a minute ago. They put a lot of time and effort into this. Their level of dedication to our community is laudable, to be honest. I was very impressed. So, and I learned a great deal. So
I do think to that point, that's why we really still want to end up as the joint housing authority, because then those bylaws, it wouldn't just matter on a handshake or agreement with people who won't be in those positions very much longer. It would actually be a part of the bylaws, and the joint housing authority concept would be reflected with the kinds of information in those bylaws that would make sure that there was that representation from Sunnyside as well as Yakima. In the meantime, what we're doing is make every effort to encourage and pursue that the city of Yakima honor any kinds of recommendations for housing authority commissioners that would come from the lower valley. And so far they seem willing, at least to say that.
All right, excellent. If there's no other comments or questions.
I've got one. I would agree with my colleagues. I'm hesitant to give up an entity that has such a place in our community. Housing for many of our, you said you had 300 units. That's a lot of people, and to give it, and that's what we're doing. We're giving it to another town to run our town. And I'm not, I've got some issues there. I don't think that that's something I particularly would want to do, at least the way it was explained here. Now, if we have equal representation on the board, that's going to be a little different story. But just to turn it over to Yakima, I've got some real heartburn over that.
So as you continue your work, you've got some comments, some concerns from the part of council that perhaps you and your committee, your direct commissioners, are able to address and maybe work out with Yakima a little bit. This isn't up for a vote tonight. This is just information for council. This is the first time everybody on council is hearing this except for myself. So we will need some time to digest this and think about it. Your handout will be very much appreciated, and that'll give us a chance to study that. And it will come up for discussion at a later date. Whether you need to meet with us at another workshop or whatever, that's entirely up to you. And we may call for that as well and ask for some more information from you. But from your explanation to me when we met, this is something that at least needs to be seriously looked at and considered.
It does. Another point I might bring is that when Wallace Anderson joined our board, he made the astute observation that there's no spring chickens on your staff. As only Wallace can. And he was hitting the nail right on the head. As it is, there are two of us that are looking at our 70th birthdays, and we really don't feel we can retire because it's not that, we're just doing something that special, but it is something that has a really big learning curve. Even in accounting, a lot of times you're learning for 2 or 3 years because there are just some really unusual things that are specific to USDA, or they're specific to the US Department of HUD, or they're specific to the state of Washington Department of Commerce. And that's one of the things that maybe concerns us a lot, where again, we typically don't, because of our size, we don't find people who are experienced that want to downsize. We typically take people who have a real desire to learn and go from there. And if we were bigger, we would like to think that we would have people coming up through the ranks so that we could sort of grow our own to take these positions. Right now, it's just, we'll see. We're also amongst Washington State housing authorities, graduating a large group of us that are all about the same age. I don't know how that happened, but it did. And it makes that sort of hiring even tougher. But we do share your concerns about having a voice. That's really why we want to do the joint housing authority if we possibly can.
All right. Last chance for further questions. Thank you so much for being here, and your comment about having, everybody the same age around the state ready to retire. That speaks very well for your generation and your commitment as a body. So,
Thank you.
all right. All right. Budget workshop. It is budget season. We're full on. Staff has been working away at this and sitting there with smiles on their faces. I think they've got things that they're excited to present to us. As we all know, it is state law that we must present a balanced budget before the end of the year. And so we need to be active at that. We've got 2 public hearings coming up. And so this is our time to learn everything we can about the upcoming budget. So with that in mind, I will turn that over to our city manager.
Which I'm just going to turn it right over to Miss Jameson so she can
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Warner.
present.
Jackie, would you mind allowing me to share my screen so that see the document? Thank you. There we go. Okay, so the binder that you have before you is the full preliminary budget. This is a preliminary budget, so there are elements that are still in draft form and that are not finished yet. There's still a lot of discussions that need to be had, and we'll go through with the departments and nitpick and fine tune up until we have our final budget hearing and we get things just the way we want them. But for the time being, we have some good bones. So in your binder, on the first page, you'll see the table of contents, and I just color coded it. So the first few things are just, Sunnyside, what we are, what we're trying to do. And then under the red tab is basically all of our legal documents. So it'll be the city manager's budget message, which she's still working on. And then our ordinances for our ad valorem property tax levy, for our 2024 operating budget, and for the 2024 classification and compensation schedule. And then the green tab is where actually all of the details are. So following the green tab is every department's, the first sheet is revenues across the entire city. There's 3 pages of that. And then every department through the general fund, through the enterprise funds for their operating budgets. So the only things that, most of the baseline operating is well documented here. There are some capital projects, just like every year at the end of one year and into the next. We're not sure exactly where some of those will cut off and be transferred into the next year. So most of those have actually stayed in the 2023 budget. I believe we'll get a lot of it, like 6th Street, maybe, hopefully we'll be all wrapped up. Who knows? And then we won't have to have anything on that in 2024, but that's kind of up in the air. When we first met at the workshop, we discussed that we were starting with a 4% increase as sort of our guideline. There have been a lot of changes in the last few years with adding different services, upgrading some of our systems. So when I went through some of the professional services and the agreements for each department's operating systems, we did actually exceed that in some areas because of a lot of the new systems that we've added. So overall, the increase from 2022 to 2021 is, I think, about 4.5%, or 2022 to 2021, 2023 to 2024, sorry, is about 4.5%.
This is revenues you're talking about.
That's expenditures, sorry.
Okay.
On the expenditure line item. Yeah. And so I can answer questions or we can just go through it.
I think at this point, we're not quite ready to ask questions unless there's a council member that wants to jump up. I'd like to start going through it and then we can ask questions as we have them come up in your explanation.
So if you'll go to page 11, that is the page that shows basically the snapshot. It's right behind the yellow, right behind the city managers. That is the snapshot of our actual financial program as it's built right now for 2024. So you'll see the left-hand column is the beginning fund balances that were expected. Then we have the revenues, expenditures, and our ending fund balance. So we are required to present a balanced budget every year, as the mayor said. So the beginning fund balance plus the revenues has to equal the expenditures plus the ending fund balances. So we do have a balanced budget for you here. So everything looks pretty good. I know we've had plenty of conversations about the water fund, which is one that we've been watching our ending fund balance on that. The water department did actually put off some deferred maintenance issues that we can. So instead of looking at about $150,000 in that fund at the end of 2024, we're more like 300,000. So that makes me feel a lot better. But we're still not quite to our 60 days of operating expenses there.
Right. And eventually that deferred maintenance will have to be done, correct?
It will. Yeah.
So it's not going to go away. So somehow
No.
or other that money's going to have to be spent.
Then if you go back to the workshop that we had, or the original retreat, page 131 is where we talked about enhancements in your binder. Most of the enhancements that were built in are staffing issues. So you'll recall that we talked about adding a court clerk because of the new requirements for diversionary programs in the court. We talked about adding a technology support assistant for the help desk because they're slammed. Bringing the recreation coordinator on full time. So that would provide a recreation department of 3. So we would have a recreation supervisor, a full-time coordinator, and then the community center receptionist. The fire marshal, we actually discussed with community and economic development director Martin, who's not here today. He wanted to look at creating this as like a deputy development director / fire marshal position. I think it would be a good fit for his department and be able to fulfill all the duties that are necessary for those inspections. And it will give it will give Trevor a little bit more support in leading that team because they have a lot of changes going on as well.
So question for that, the technician that would be able to do the fire marshal's inspections, do they have to be a certified firefighter or have any kind of certification in that area?
I will defer over here to actually Mr. Corey Taylor, I believe probably might know the answer to those questions, or Chad.
Yeah, if you can speak in the microphone, that'd be probably a good idea.
To my knowledge, they would not have to be a full-on firefighter.
Okay. The reason I ask is because in the past, the fire marshal has always been under the fire department. So I'm just kind of wanting to make sure that we're not missing something here.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, it was be more of a office job, workplace compared to an actual structure firefighter.
Okay.
The individual has to know about reviewing the plans, checking fire code, and potentially investigating issues that come up. Am I missing anything? So it does go hand in hand sort of with the building department as well.
Okay. Further questions? I feel like I'm dominating with all the questions here.
The next position we talked about was the development technician, which would be somebody to help with business licensing and sort of the internal work between departments for a plethora of different things that kind of fall through the cracks right now. And then at the workshop, Deputy Mayor Restucci brought up the desire to have a communications director. So we reviewed our city clerk executive assistant position and are proposing making a change to a communications director / city clerk for that position. That would put one person in charge of all public information that can really spearhead that and be the city clerk as well. So they're responsible for the records. So it does seem to align. And then Counselor Hicks brought up the need for another manager level in HR. And so we're looking at reclassifying one of the HR generalists into an HR manager. So there would be an HR generalist and an HR manager, which would handle more of the higher level investigations and stuff like that. So it'd be a go-between between the HR generalist and myself. And that's about it for staffing.
Questions from council about staffing?
Would the HR report under you or under the city manager?
Under me.
Okay, so the funding for all of that hiring would come from where?
So if you look at revenues are on page 23. Most of these positions are funded out of the general fund. So the areas where we would need to look to collect some of that revenue is one of the topics has come up and it will continue to come up is the cost of permitting and the cost for doing business in the building department for things that are for the benefit of a developer or an individual person, and making sure that those costs are collected correctly so that the taxpayers aren't offsetting the cost for an individual that would be benefiting from that. So we're still reviewing those fees often, trying to get closer maybe to where we're actually collecting the correct amount of cost on that. Some of the other ones are like HR and IT are going to be split across the entire city. So the funds are supported through the enterprise funds, through the special revenue funds, and through the general fund.
Okay, just as an aside, I was informed last week that Sunnyside has some of the most expensive sign permitting fees in the valley.
Oh, I'm not aware of that.
Apparently, we charge our permits by the square inch or square foot or something of our signs. Is that correct? We don't have the right person visiting here today to give us the answer.
So when you look at the general fund revenues, it's that top box there. The vast majority of revenue for the general fund is collected through tax. So it is property tax, sales tax, and city-owned utility tax. And that's what funds almost pretty much everything in the general fund. So we do have some flexibility in adjusting the cost or the percentage for like utility. But I don't really believe that we're going to need to do that right now. I think with the way that inflation is going right now, there's enough increase sort of built in the way that our tax structure works that we are kind of keeping up. We just need to keep a close eye on it and make sure that we're keeping our minimum fund balances and not spending all sorts of money we don't need to.
And I agree. I think there's a pretty strong sentiment that's been voiced on council in the past that if we can possibly not raise taxes, we'd love to not raise taxes. So. Further questions? Carry on.
So the very back of the binder after the pink tab is informational stuff. So the first section there is called the basis of accounting handout. This kind of goes over local government accounting on a cash basis. And I know there have been recently a lot of questions about how local government accounting works. And so there's some really great information here for people if they would like to check that out. There's also a glossary of terms. Believe it or not, it is a very complex issue, and the state auditor's office makes changes all the time. So there's lots of information there for you. So the next step in the budget process will be next week meeting on the property tax levy, sorry. And I believe we have a public hearing at this next meeting, and then we would actually set that tax levy at the second meeting in October.
Correct. Yeah, we have the public hearing to comment on that, and then we vote on it at our second regular meeting. So that's, yeah, we have a public hearing on the ad valorem tax. So.
And that's pretty much all I've got. I'm sure everybody will want to digest the information in here. It's full of stuff. Please keep in mind it is preliminary. So a budget is a live document. It is a plan. a budget is something that is mutable, and no, we shouldn't change it willy-nilly, and the council always has to approve any of those changes. But a budget is constantly changing as new information comes in, new revenues come in, different things happen, so.
Correct. And we're not close to the point of having it ready to prove yet. So there's going to be changes that we can make. We can make all sorts of comments on them. We can receive comments from local citizens and hear what they have to say. What is good, and I appreciate the fact that you put all the glossary in and how government accounting works as opposed to what our regular CPA would do, because that was quite the mental shock for me. Self-employed, I run a small business, and everything that the city did, it seemed like it was different. And I thought I had a pretty good understanding what I was doing in my business, and I came here and had it explained to me by, and I don't mean any disrespect for the gentleman, but he was deaf and trying to understand what I was saying and trying to explain it to me. We made very little progress. So it took me a while to get a grasp of it. And so I appreciate the fact that that's there. That allows us to study that. Council, we have 135 pages here to digest before Monday. I encourage you to do so. I know the temptation is to set it on a shelf and go about our regular business, but this is something that this is probably the largest responsibility we have as council to approve the budget, and it is a big deal. So we need to take it serious. I encourage you to read it. I will be reading tonight and tomorrow night. As my wife is gone, I have no one to distract me right now. She went to go take care of a new baby that our daughter had. So I have nothing to do but read city budgets. I'm hoping the rest of you are as bored as I am.
It's not boring. Come on.
And so, any further comments on this item or questions or?
I'd just like to say thank you. This is easy to understand.
And I will put something out in years past. Our budgets have went from when I first started, they were basically a handout that had a bars number and a budget number, and the pages weren't numbered. And I remember asking, where's the real budget? And so for us to get to here is a commendable job. Jamie, I appreciate you.
No, I remember that as well. Sometimes I feel like the newbie on council still because Mr. Hicks has been here longer than me. Mr. Risucci's been here much longer than me. Mr. Farmer's on his second time around, so he's got a depth of experience too. But the first couple of years, it was a struggle to get through it. And this is a really nice binder. I can go back to the binders for the last couple of years and find what I need to find. It's there. You guys made some really positive changes, and it makes it easier for people like us to understand and hopefully to explain to people when they ask. And it's kind of nice to be able to just pull that off the shelf. So.
And until this is finalized, anytime we make changes at each meeting, if we've come to some sort of change, I'll go over that change and also give you updated pages to replace in this binder. So this should be the one that you get to keep through the entire process, through the final budget.
Okay, so I do have one question. We talked about the positions at this point until we decide to pull it. We're just kind of assuming that the positions that we talked about will be hired, correct?
Well, they're in the budget.
Yeah.
Will they be hired? I don't know. The hiring is a difficult thing to
Right.
do right now. So
But I mean, we're assuming at this point until we decide, you know what, maybe we can't do it or something else. But at this point, they're assuming to be present in the budget, I guess is probably a better way. to
they
say it.
are present and accounted for in this balanced budget. There are some, I will point out, if you look at like on this page 11, the top line is the general fund. You'll see that we start with a beginning balance in the general fund of about $4 million. And at the end of 2024, it's 1.7 million. A lot of that is because of ARPA spending that we're still trying to get through. But some of it is because of, we've had so many salary changes, new contracts put in place. And so we're also having the fire department do a time study to figure out what the correct split should be between the ambulance fund and the general fund. And then there's a lot of other positions that touch multiple different areas. So that's going to be a focus of ours to sort of figure out and make sure that each fund is appropriately paying for the staff that is being utilized for it.
Correct. And then we still have positions in the police department that are unfilled as well, and they will stay in the budget as well also, correct?
Yes, and just keep in mind, because I budget very conservatively, I budget every position for the entire full year. So obviously, we're gonna have openings, we're gonna have crossover between somebody retiring and somebody new coming in. But I like to make sure that we are budgeted if we had every single staff member through the entire year. That way, if we do someday never have anyone who ever quits, we will be able to pay all those salaries. So.
Very good. That pretty well sums up the questions I came with. Any others?
No
Mr.
question,
Deputy.
just a thank you to the staff. Appreciate the work that you did on the budget. And Ms. Warner, I'll be giving you a call here for some questions that I have that I want to talk with you about.
Okay, thanks.
All right, if there's no more questions or comments, and Madam City Manager, you don't have anything else that needs to be brought up? If there's no objection, well, we do have one thing on the agenda yet, don't we? Future meetings. Sorry about that. Upcoming council meetings, item 2. There you are. Did you want to go over these, or did you want Jackie to go over those, or what did you?
Go ahead, Jackie.
Okay, October 9th is our regular meeting. We have the public hearing for revenue sources and property tax levy for 2024. And then October 23rd, you'll be taking action on that item. And the city manager will present her budget message and LTAC funding recommendations. And that's it for October for now.
Okay, thank you. And I understand our LTAC met today and have recommendations, so we may be seeing those soon, probably at our next regular meeting. So that's kind of nice. I know that's been a bit of a process this year, so. All right, now, if there's no objection, our meeting is adjourned at 7:11 PM. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.